Okay, so we've got our quilt laid out flat. You want it nice and flat. And we're going to join these binding pieces. So we're going to take our long end, and to be honest, it really doesn't matter whether you start with the long end or the short end, just whichever one ends up being easier for you to work with. But I'm going to take the long end, and I'm going to kind of spread that out like it would be if I was about to sew it together onto the quilt. And you want to pull it to where it's laying flat, but you don't want to stretch it. And we're going to, if you pressed your binding in half, go ahead and open that up now. And we're going to take this long tail, and we're going to fold it so that this side and this side makes close to a 90-degree angle. It does not have to be perfect. You'll just do, whichever just be pretty close, because the way we're going to do this, it's going to make it to where it doesn't matter. And what you want to do is you want to be sure that when you take your other end and lay it out over it, that the part with the selvage is farther than, is like on the inside of this part that you folded over. Now, I actually want this fold to be pretty close to where the selvage is, because the farther away this part and this part are, the less leeway you have when you're trying to sew this together. So I'm going to make myself a little mark with my fingernail right here. I'm going to use that as my place where I make that fold. Now, like I said, one more thing, it doesn't matter whether you fold this way or if I were to try to fold it that way. Really, the only thing that might maybe matter is that your diagonal seam in your quilt ends up going the same way that your other seams were. So you can check that. I'm just going to grab my scissors and just put them here for a reference for you. By folding this over like it would be in your quilt, and look at the closest seam. So there's a seam right here, and it is going this direction, and this part where I folded over is going that direction. So the seams are going to be going the same direction. Now, I'll be honest, the diagonal seam going in the same direction as all the others is not something that I would go picking stitches out for. So we're going to make that hard crease there, and you can get out your iron and press it if you want to. And we're just going to pull this piece over and make sure that the selvage part is clearing that little fold line. So my fold line is right here, and the selvage is right there, so we're good. We just don't want that selvage showing up in our quilt. So with that folded over, do a check and just make sure that this is pulled out nicely. You want it laying flat like it would when you get it completely attached to your quilt, but you don't want to pull it stretching it. So we're going to get some glue, and I'm just going to glue this little triangle that's kind of between here and here. I'm just going to put some glue on that. And this is that same glue we used earlier, just washable glue stick. And then we're going to get this other side of the binding, and we're going to lay it flat. And if you pressed your binding in half, open it up now. So we're going to lay that flat like we would want it in the quilt, and press that down so that that is glued together nicely. So a good little test here is you can kind of fold this up like it would be in your quilt and pull that straight and make sure that it's going to lay flat for you. And that's going to be nice for you because then you can open this up, and that crease line that you made where we made that hard crease is going to be a great visual guide, and you'll just sew right down that crease. So with that glued together, the first thing I'm going to do is I am going to fold this quilt in on itself. And I'm going to pin that together really close to the parts where you stopped and started sewing on your binding. You can use a big clip like I've got. You can use a clothespin. You can use pins, whatever you want to do. And that is going to make it to where when you go to your sewing machine to sew this, it gives you a little bit more leeway. So when you sew it, you will open up this part that was folded, and you'll have a nice line from where you made that hard crease. Sew down that line, and that's going to make it to where your binding meets nicely in the center. Okay, so we're at the sewing machine. I have taken off my 1/4 inch seam foot and put on my regular presser foot, and I have marked this little crease line with a pencil lightly so that you can see it. Some fabrics it's easier to see that crease line on without marking, so if you need to mark it, just mark lightly or use something that you trust to erase. And we're going to start sewing right down that line. All right, and before we trim anything off, I'm going to remove that clothespin or big clip, whatever you had, and we're just going to stretch this out across our quilt, and just, you know, double check for yourself that it's not twisted and that it looks like it's going to fit nicely, and mine does. So since it looks like it's going to fit nicely, we're going to trim off this excess. So you're going to just cut about, I usually do about a 1/2 inch to the outside of that stitch line that we just sewed. I'm going to trim these little horns off. All right, now you can go back to your iron if you want to and press this seam open. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to finger press it. Now just know that there's going to be glue there, so you will have to pull those pieces apart to unstick that glue. It's not a big deal. This glue washes out nicely. All right, so now I'm going to change my foot. I'm going to go back to my 1/4 inch seam foot that I was using to attach the binding. And we're just going to finish that binding off, finish attaching it by starting back where we left off and completing that binding. Sorry, I bumped my camera. All right. And we're ready to sew. And we're doing the same thing as we have been doing the whole time, just folding those that binding in half, wrong sides together as we go. And it looks like this is going to fit really nicely. Alrighty. Okay, and it fit on there nicely. So the next steps will just be folding this over and doing a top stitch.